Hey everybody, welcome to week 5, the truth about initiation in our Stegonaria 101 course. I hope that you guys have been enjoying the previous 4-week sessions and hope that everybody's starting to find a little bit more space, a little more comfort in participating at whatever level you are most comfortable in the course. And so this week, I just want to go ahead and jump right in. We have a lot of material to cover, and just a couple points of housekeeping. Remember that we really encourage you guys, after watching the lecture, to go ahead and share what a couple of your greatest takeaways are right beneath this video in the section of the classroom where this video and the PowerPoint itself are located. If you go ahead and just comment in that area, let us know what your greatest takeaways are. If you have any questions about the material, this is also the best place to put that. And then remember that on Mondays, we have our live discussion. And then on every other week on Tuesdays, we have a live discussion as well that gives you the opportunity to ask questions on that Monday and Tuesday. One is held, of course, on Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern time. The Tuesday, every other Tuesday, you can check your schedule to find out which week cycle we're on. But that every other Tuesday, it's at noon Eastern time for those that have a more difficult time being with us in the evening due to children and scheduling and work and things like that. So let's go ahead and dive into the presentation. And as I said, this week, week 5, we are talking about the truth about initiation. And this is really part of a two-part segment. The first week, we're going to be doing an exercise at the end of our presentation that allows us to sort of open ourselves up for a download of wisdom and initiation of sorts to begin to take place in our lives. And then next week, we're going to go deeper into a bit more ritual work for that sort of an initiation. But first, a little bit of an overview. In a world in which witchcraft is often conflated with paganism, as we've discussed over the last few weeks, there's no shortage of people who will attempt to advance the absurd idea that only the path of the initiatory cults are legitimate and that self-taught witches lack some kind of secret that they possess in neo-pagan initiatory cults. The practitioners of ancient and authentic folk magic, mystics, and shamans knew better, and this week we're going to talk about why. So let's get started talking about initiation itself. What is it? Initiation means to begin a process, to start something. Initiation sets the forces in motion for your own personal metamorphosis, transformation, and spiritual journey. As you can see in the image on this slide, taken from the mystery school traditions, you have the teacher on the left, the initiate in the middle, and a form of deity or ascended higher wisdom, Sapientia, beside them. In the earliest forms of artwork, we find this symbolism, this trinity, if you will, that exists, which we talked about last week, as we talked about the significance of 3, 6, and 9. These are some of the earliest motifs in which we see that symbolism of that trinity aspect of ourselves. Initiation serves to ground our spiritual energies. The energies that you're wielding, that you've wielded from the moment that you were born, such as light and darkness, creativity, power, and protection, become grounded through the process of initiation. These forces become anchored to your energy field so that you're more readily able to access these energies through your mental, emotional, and physical capacities to support you in your daily life's choices and tasks and actions. It's a process of mindfully reclaiming the control of those things. And so initiation is the handing down of knowledge that prepares you for taking that next step in life. So whatever the next initiation is, whatever the next process is, the initiation just before that creates a template for living an empowered life and opening ourselves up to the potential to master our worlds, to master our energy, to master the creative process so that we can begin to create the life that we truly desire. So initiation, it can be said, activates this knowledge with spiritual power to support you to be in alignment with your highest and greatest good so that you can live out your purpose here on earth. Now, I'd like to talk just for a second about initiation and personal gnosis. The way that you know that it's time for you to begin an initiation may be something that some of you are already familiar with. It may be something that you're really comfortable with. But for those of you who say, I don't know if I'm ready, if I'm looking for initiation, I don't know if initiation is even something that matters to me. Here are just a couple of the experiences that we have in life that might let us know that we're ready for an organic initiatory process to begin. If you feel inspired to make a difference in this world, if you're committed to your spiritual growth, your self-development in a real and tangible way, and it feels like you have to do something now, or if you're willing to do what it takes, whatever that is, to live a fulfilled and meaningful life, and you're trying to figure out what comes next. Maybe you know that there's something more to life than just the present experience, this physical experience that we're having. Or you're aware of a greater consciousness beyond this realm of reality. You've caught glimmers of it and you want to know more. Perhaps it's time for initiation for you if you've tried many different spiritual programs and paths and you found some truth in all of them or many of them, but there was always something that felt like it was missing. And then, sometimes there's just no words to describe it. The inner knowing that it's time for an initiation is enough. It's a feeling in your heart, in your soul. It just feels right. It feels like this is time for something big to happen. Those are points at which most people recognize that they're ready for some sort of initiation. Now, the problem, as I said in the beginning, is that initiation in the witchcraft traditions, the initiatory witchcraft traditions, or covens as they're often called, for many of the so-called initiatory traditions in witchcraft, they were nothing more than 20th century recreations of how their founders imagined the ancient mystery school traditions to have functioned. A lot of times these traditions tend to be more religion than witchcraft, as we've talked about in previous weeks, and they tend to draw a lot of their inspiration from, as bizarrely, not from witchcraft, but from 19th and 20th century occult secret societies, things like the Freemasons and Rosicrucianism and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Now, there is no demonstrable connection, historic relevance, or anthropological evidence that witchcraft was ever this sort of initiatory tradition until the 20th century, with people like Gerald Gardner and Alex Sanders and so forth. Instead, what we find, as you can see in the photo that's pictured on the right, and that is a real photograph of a real historic initiatory rite in an early 20th century, or actually mid 20th century witchcraft cult. And we can find plenty of evidence that would lend itself to believe that these sort of initiatory witchcraft traditions of the 50s and 60s were pseudo-religious justification for what at the very best could be called questionable motivations, sexual proclivities, and manipulation by some of pop culture witchcraft's founders. And I don't need to go any further than just to put this photo on the screen for you guys to see why I have such a visceral reaction to this notion that a person who doesn't go through initiatory witchcraft is not a practicing witch. This photograph shows you the historic roots of initiatory witchcraft in the Western world. It didn't begin in Etruria. It didn't begin in Tuscany. It didn't begin in the 1900s or the 1800s or the 1600s or the 1300s. It began in 1948 and 49 in England and the United States. And this is what it often looked like. Now, I want to be clear. In the modern day, 20th and 21st century initiatory witchcraft traditions range from more eccentric traditions to more ceremonial practices, and they're almost always exclusively tied to some form of legitimate neo-pagan religious practice. More times than not, these traditions are unsurprisingly linked to pop culture witches' books and to their approach to neo-pagan practice. So you have some incredible leaders in the movement. People like Laurie Cabot, people like Christopher Penczak and Devin Hunter, whose books become sort of the foundation for witchcraft covens and initiatory practices. So we don't find that sort of manipulation that was rampant and rabid in the 40s and 50s. Very few cults and mystery schools in the modern era are cause for any concern ethically, morally, and psychologically. The only concerns that I would have is with some of their claims of having ancient historic connections, and those few younger leaders of traditions that absurdly and they, with hubris, have the audacity to claim that unless you are devoted to the goddess, or you're part of a coven that's also a religion, that you're not legitimately a witch. That kind of stupidity is simply that, stupidity. More often than not, you're going to find dress up and theatricality and expressions that draw heavily on 20th century movie culture and literature that dictate the practices more than reliance on any historic or anthropologically relevant traditions. And so by contrast to the previous slide, on this slide, you kind of see what neo-pagan witchcraft traditions, initiatory traditions look like today. So let's contrast that to the Afro-Siculo and Southern Italian magical traditions, where we view initiation as something more classically linked to what could be called esotericism than what pop culture calls witchcraft, which is more closely linked to occultism. See, men in the Italian and Sicilian traditions were often initiated into a hermetic form of a mystery school tradition. So they actually studied the science of living, the science of mind, as it were, or hermeticism, where the women were traditionally initiated informally around the winter solstice of their 6th year and brought into the ways and the customs of that family's herbal and prayerful practice, the healing practice. It was just thought of as our way of life. Like I've said in so many of these previous presentations, it wasn't at all about witchcraft. We didn't use that word to describe our tradition, and to this current day, we still don't. Now, the Italian-Sicilian tradition approaches initiation as an organic process, like I said, rather than a ceremonial process. During this process of initiation, which takes place during the greater part of our lives, and in our tradition, in our particular family tradition, we say, through the first 5 decades of your life, especially, but continuing through the rest of your life. During that process, the student cultivates 4 primary areas of their spiritual and metaphysical understanding. Whether you're male or female, there are connections in what we sort of study. So when I distilled this information down, these traditions down for the purpose of this class, I found that there were 4 areas that both men and women focus on. The first is correspondences. This is that idea that we've talked about previously in the orientation materials, that there are both real and symbolic correspondences existing between all things within the universe, the as above, so below. The second area that we often study is singular essence, is what I call it. Esoteric practitioners of Stegonaria envision the natural universe as being imbued with its own life force. And as such, we believe that that everything all around us is a living expression of creative intelligence. And so whether you tend toward a more scientific approach where we see everything around us as almost being holographic, or more artsy, as you see it as an expression, almost a painting being done by creative mind, it's that singular essence, that oneness that we spend our lives being aware of and studying. Going hand in hand with that is this awareness of signs and symbols and meanings. In our tradition, we place great emphasis on both the human imagination and meditations or contemplations, such as rituals and symbolic images, mandalas, intermediary spirits, and mantras, sound frequencies, and spoken spell work as tools that provide access to worlds and levels of reality, planes, if you will, existing between the material world and the divine. And then that final area of our focus, the fourth area, is what I call experiential transmutation. I know on the slide it says experiential of transmutation. I originally had the experience of transmutation. This intrinsic characteristic of the Italian and Sicilian esotericism places emphasis on fundamentally transforming ourselves through our practices. For instance, through the spiritual transformation that accompanies the attainment of personal gnosis, of personal revelation. So experiential transmutation. Just pretend the of isn't on there because I know that my brother Gregory probably caught that before I even got to that point on the slide, and I am not about to redo this entire video. Now, just a quick word on lineage, because you will hear it thrown about quite often. Neo-pagans largely function under the delusion that their traditions can trace back their lineage to an ancient witchcraft sect, but they are not alone. I hear very often people who are part of these neo-pagan traditions who claim that because they come from a hereditary tradition of witchcraft, that somehow they have more powers, or they're more skillful, or they're more quote unquote gifted, I hate that term, than others because they come from a long line of witches. And while one might be certainly more privileged, if you will, more honored, more fortunate to come from a hereditary tradition because they had the support and perhaps the tutelage of those who walked this path before, where others have to sort of find their place in the world first before they can begin to study. Hereditary traditions actually view lineage as simply the mode of transmission for an oral tradition, or the passing down of physical books and materials from one generation to the next. No one is more powerful, more skilled, more gifted, a higher practitioner or whatever, just because they come from a family of practitioners. Now, we believe there are organic experiences of initiation that every one of us begins to experience from the moment we're born. We're born into a family, or we choose a family of tradition. And so there is an initiation that takes place when you're born into that family, or when you find a family, as some of you did with this family in our class. That's sort of an initiatory experience of birth. And then there's the experience of confirmation, where we're accepted into the secret traditions of that family's bonds of trust. Now, secret doesn't necessarily mean, woo-woo secrets. It simply means that you're taken into the bond of trust, into the circle of trust, that the things that happen within that family, within that tradition, are kept within that family and within that tradition, so that they're not abused, they're not used incorrectly, and they aren't used to harm others. And then there's the initiation that comes from what I call shamanic journey work, which are rites of passage, energetic transmissions, where you start to really do the deeper work on yourself, sort of what I call the living retreat experience. That is a form of organic initiation. And then the final initiation that I believe we all experience in this life is the initiation of death, transcendence of the physical plane into a new level of awareness and existence. So just a word or two on spiritual initiation. Spiritual initiation happens when we're ready to take the next evolutionary step in our lives. So if you want to know why you haven't experienced an initiation up until a certain point, or why it's been a long time since your last one, you have to look at whether you're ready to take that next evolutionary step. It's a landmark, a tipping point in our life's journey. So in hindsight, we can usually look back at those moments of initiation as light bulb moments in which we changed our thinking and therefore we change our lives. But because whenever we change our thinking, our potential either expands or contracts, sometimes we don't recognize the moment that thinking changed as an initiation until there's enough distance between us and that moment to say, oh yeah, that's when everything began to fall into place. With spiritual initiations, our potential expands. And as a result of our potential expanding, our actions take on a new, more affirming life path, and our destiny changes accordingly. You've heard me say before that witches don't change circumstances or people, they change the energy around the circumstances or people, and then their experience changes with it. And so this week we begin what I think are a lot meatier, grittier, more incredible experiences, exercises in our craft work. Our exercise for this week involves creating space for initiation to occur in our lives. And this is an exercise that's going to require work. It can't be done in a single hour. It needs to be done in the order that I give it to you, in the exact order prescribed. However, the elements of the practice can and should be personalized as you see fit. So what I mean by this is that you're not going to be able to rush this. And so part of this exercise, part of this class is learning how to get your priorities in order. So I don't want to hear how busy you were this week. I don't want to hear how things just got away and the kids were noisy and the dog had the shits and you had to go take Susie to ballet practice. Everybody has a life, and all of our lives are busy, and all of our lives have things that come up that we may or may not have planned for. But if you don't make your spiritual practice a priority, then you will always find yourself making excuses instead of making progress. So again, I don't want to hear your excuses. I'm not interested in anyone's excuses because all excuses are equal. You need to set aside the time. And so before you can set aside the time, it's probably good to listen to the rest of the video so that you know what's involved, and then look at your schedule and make it happen. So here's part one. Part one is going to take 30 to 45 minutes. You need 30 to 45 minutes of undistracted time to sit contemplatively. Now, some of you, that's going to mean early in the morning. For others, that's going to mean late at night. For others, it might mean the middle of the day when nobody's home. And during this period of 30 to 45 minutes, you may wish to burn incense or have a candle burning, which you can anoint with your Strega oil that all of you made last week. Just take a little drop of the oil. Don't get the oil all full of oil. Don't get the candle all full of oil because you'll cause a fire. So you just take a little drop of the oil on your thumb and create a symbol that whatever works for you, be it a pentacle, be it a cross, be it just a smudge, whatever it is that works for you. Just a little bit of it. What I like to do, because I am pyrophobic when it comes to doing things that can cause a fire, is I may take my candle and put a little bit of the Strega oil and just anoint the very top of the candle around the wick before I light it, naturally, and then place that candle in a bowl of water or sand. Never leave it unattended. When I place for this particular element of the practice, When I would place it in water, I would probably put a sprig or two of rosemary, or a sprig or two, particularly rosemary, but a sprig or two of rosemary and rue would be nice in the water with the candle in the center. You're going to want to have a journal, a notebook, or any other way that you want to notate, whether that's on your iPad or whatever is up to you. Think about the ways in which you were naturally initiated into your spiritual path, whether that's metaphysics or witchcraft, healing, or magic. Who played a role? Who was an influence for you? And then I want you to allow yourself to sort of sit with that gratitude for the gifts that they transmitted. Maybe jot down, make a little list of what that person imparted to you, how they really helped to plant those seeds for you. And remember, at the end of this 30 to 45 minutes, do not blow out your candle. When we blow out candles in our tradition, we're blowing away the intention. We want this intention to be rooted. So you can place a plate over it. You can use a candle snuffer. You could put your hand over it if you're crazy, to extinguish the candle, not blow it out. And that's part one. Now, part two may take you another 30 to 45 minutes, even an hour. I want you to take a relaxing bath with the intention of cleansing yourself, just giving yourself an opportunity to cleanse away the stress, cleanse away the tension, so that you prepare your heart and mind for a download process to begin. All right. If you were a computer, you would be defragmenting your hard drive so that all of the space is created for a download to begin effectively. And then at your kitchen table, I want you to set a placemat. And upon that placemat, put either a white or a blue candle, again, preferably in a bowl of sand or a bowl of water, a small potted plant of any kind, whatever is meaningful to you, incense, preferably rue, nag champa, or frankincense incense, a bowl of water. And if you're using a candle in a bowl of water, that counts as the candle and the bowl of water. And a photo of an ancestor or a saint or a deity or symbol that connects you with universal energy, universal consciousness, with your roots. So if you don't have a photo of an ancestor you're particularly connected to, like a grandmother, grandfather, aunt, or uncle, or a parent who has crossed over, then a symbol or a deity, or for some people it may be a photograph. Well, when I was disconnected with my parents, there's an image that was taken from my monastic cell in Provence, which sits on my wall now above my desk. And I just kept that on my altar when I would do this practice. And it was a connection to my ancestors. And so you want to have all of those on the placemat. And then as you approach the table, you approach with a mindfulness, a sense of going to visit somebody that you love. So I want you to bring a plate of cookies or biscotti, some bread or some fruit or a combination thereof. I would recommend that you make it something that you enjoy, first of all, but something that if it's for a particular ancestor, make sure that if it was an aunt who hated coffee, you don't bring coffee. If it was an aunt who was a teetotaler, don't bring wine. But have some coffee or wine, a plate of biscotti or whatever, place a cup for them and a cup for you. And if it's wine, you could do a little shot glass of wine. There's no sense wasting wine. In the most conversational of ways, next, I want you to thank the ancestors. I want you to thank the elements of water and fire and earth and air and spirit. Thank the spirits of your house, including Bella and Brianna, and the spirits of the lands that you sit on, for being part of your life and for their support of your life's process. And then ask them to help you, and this is the verbiage I want you to use, to create the causes and conditions for increased awareness, development, and power. Okay, so you're going to want to jot that exact phrase down over time. I'm going to suggest that you make this part of your vocabulary, so that when you're sitting preparing to do any kind of work, say, I ask that the spirits of my ancestors, the spirits and elements of this house and this place, the spirits of my tribe, support and help me to create the causes and conditions for increased awareness, development, and power that this working might be successful. And then the final part of this week's exercise is I want you to, after about 30 minutes, 45 minutes or so, take the ancestors' portion of the wine, the coffee, or the tea outside and pour it into the ground, and then just sit there in nature, preferably barefooted if you can, with your feet grounded on the actual earth itself, and allow yourself to notice the cursory thoughts that come and go. And if any images or ideas or breakthroughs come up, be sure to note those in your journal. Now, you don't have to share those realizations with anybody else. These are purely for you. But then in the comments below this video, I want to encourage you to share how this three-part experience, how this three-part ritual unfolded for you. Were there any points of resistance, any points that you were pushing back that you didn't want to do? Any points of joy or release of emotions, any realizations that you want to share? Please go ahead and do that as well. I think that when you give yourself the time to do this process, to allow this process to kind of organically unfold, you're going to begin to see a building week after week of things falling into place, aha moments that start to happen more readily. And we look forward to you sharing those, whether you share those when we have our discussion on Monday night or on Tuesday, or whether you wait to share those things in writing in the group. Just know that your generosity of sharing may have a powerful impact on somebody else and help them to understand more clearly what it is that they're going through that they might have been looking for words to explain. That's it for this week. I will look forward to seeing you guys on Monday night for our discussion, for our first discussion on this. And as always, we encourage you to stay in the moment, to be grateful for everything you've got. That opens the door for the abundance, the magic, the experience itself to unfold all around you. And always remember, the best is yet to come. We'll talk to you soon.